You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we've got a lot of news today. Today was the big scheduling hearing down in D.C. with Judge Chutkan for Donald Trump. It was also his arraignment for the superseding indictment. So, again, we have a lot to cover, but so as not to bury the lead here, the most important point that I think worth bringing up is that Judge Chutkan seemed to take aim at Judge Cannon down in Florida. Can you speak on what she said?
Yeah, it was surprising because the topic of Judge Cannon's ruling saying that special counsel's not really a thing, it's not lawful, which is contrary to how all other judges and all other courts, including the Supreme Court, has resolved this issue. So John Lauro brought up the fact that, well, we're going to have to litigate whether special counsel is lawful and constitutional or not, because there's that Florida court judge, interesting, he didn't name her, who just entered a ruling recently saying special counsel is not lawful. And then Judge Chutkan said, that Florida court judge, I don't find her ruling particularly persuasive.
Well, on that topic, actually, Donald Trump's lawyers actually said in the courtroom that Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, and this is the quote, directed us to raise the issue of special counsels. And that got a little bit of pushback in court. That was received in a pretty surprising way. Can you speak on that moment?
I think we all raised an eyebrow when they were talking about, when the defense, Donald Trump's lawyers, were talking about, whether special counsel was lawful or not. And John Lauro, Donald Trump's lead criminal defense attorney, said, well, Clarence Thomas told us or directed us to raise this issue. And it kind of stopped Judge Chutkan in her tracks. And she said, whoa. Justice Thomas told you to raise? He said, well, I can't say he told us to raise the issue. But, when you read his concurring opinion on this subject, it was pretty clear that, that's what he wanted to see happen. Now, Brian, I don't know if it was a Freudian slip. I don't know if Clarence Thomas actually told Donald Trump and his defense attorneys to raise the issue as John Lauro originally stated in court before backtracking. But I'll tell you, that caught us all by surprise. And then Judge Chutkan went on to note, well, wait a minute. Neither a trial court judge's opinion down in Florida consists of precedent for me, particularly when it contradicts with the precedent that actually exists on that issue, ruling that absolutely special counsel is lawful and constitutional. And then she also had to add, and dicta, which means non-binding explanations in a court opinion, dicta in a separate concurring opinion by Justice Thomas is not precedent. So it was clear she was having none of John Lauro's arguments that somehow people should sit up and take note when that Florida judge issues a ruling or Clarence Thomas kind of ruminates out loud in a separate concurring opinion that, maybe special counsel's not really a thing.
And finally, I do want to touch on one other point that I think is especially important, and that is that she made clear she's not taking the election itself into account in terms of how this entire case should be proceeding. Can you speak on that moment?
Yeah, this was really important, and this was central to the issue that had to be decided at today's status hearing. What became clear very early on, Brian, was the prosecutors, Jack Smith's team, was prepared to file a brief that disclosed, revealed all of Donald Trump's crimes and conduct that we don't yet know about, the stuff that did not make its way into the original indictment or the superseding indictment. And they said, we can file that promptly whenever your court decides to set the filing deadline. And I have to tell you, from that point on, John Lauro, Donald Trump's defense attorney, was on fire trying to persuade Judge Tanya Chutkan not to disclose anything about Trump's conduct before the election. And Brian, that's where Judge Chutkan got her most animated, because at one point, John Lauro was trying not to tie his argument to the upcoming election. But at one point he said, well, if you let the prosecutors disclose this information, it won't be fair that they will get to put it in the public record at this very sensitive time in our nation's history. And at that point, there was an audible, from Judge Chutkan. We all kind of took note. and it prompted her to say this. She said, "An electoral calendar or the timing of an election is not relevant here. This court is not concerned with the electoral schedule. That is nothing I'm going to consider." And it became clear that John Laurow's entire goal in today's hearing was to try to convince Judge Chutkan not to let any other information about Donald Trump's crimes, about his acts, about his conduct on and around January 6th be disclosed in any kind of a public filing before the election. And, it was really a political argument by John Lauro masquerading as a legal argument. And if there's one thing I've never seen any attorney do, no prosecutor or no defense attorney, it's put one over on Judge Chutkan, pull the wool over her eyes, and she saw right through it. She called it out, and now we are awaiting next steps, which could come as early as later today.
Well, that actually leads me to my next question here, which is, what are next steps? Can you speak on when that decision is going to come about and what we expect it to be regarding?
Yeah, Judge Chutkan let us know. So ultimately, she asked the prosecutors, how much time do you need to put together this brief that discloses Donald Trump's other crimes and conduct? And they said, Judge, we can have it prepared within about 3 weeks. And they asked for September 26th for a filing date. And she ultimately said, 3 weeks sounds reasonable. And then she said, I will put that in my scheduling order. I will answer all these questions. I'll set it all out. And I expect to have my scheduling order out as early as today. So we could see it later today, Brian. We could see it tomorrow. But I have a feeling very soon we're going to have a date by which the American people are going to learn a whole lot more about Donald Trump's crimes and conduct. In fact, what the prosecutor, Thomas Wyndham, said was, Judge, when we file this new motion, this new pleading with the court, we expect to disclose and attach to the filing grand jury transcripts, interview transcripts, FBI 302s. Those are recordings, written recordings of interviews with witnesses, documentary evidence, and other things. So get ready, because it feels like within the next few weeks, we're going to get a download of really damaging information about precisely how Donald Trump tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election.
And finally, let's end with this. What's your top line based on the hearing today for Donald Trump's team, for Jack Smith's team?
Top line is, now that Judge Chutkan has this case back, just as she has said repeatedly, it will not yield or be governed by an election cycle. She is going to push forward expeditiously but responsibly. Election be damned. She's going to have the hearing that the Supreme Court told her to have, so she can rule about, whether what Donald Trump did in each and every instance was an official act worthy of immunity or was an unofficial act, or the act of a candidate or a private person not worthy of immunity. But she acknowledged today, Brian, they're going to package all that up. And she says, inevitably, because it's an immunity decision that is immediately appealable, she fully expects the defense, she didn't say that, but she fully expects a new appeal once this litigation runs its course.
Okay, well, we will, of course, stay on top of all of this as it continues to play itself out, including when we hear from Judge Chutkan, hopefully today, about next steps here in this case. So for those watching right now, if you want to follow along with any news as soon as it breaks, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.